60 doesn't feel like anything, really. It's not a million. It's not a round number. It just sounds tired. I spent the morning like I always do. Black coffee, the crossword, the sound of the door pulling away from me, and a view of a tree that refuses to turn green, no matter how much I water it. It was quiet, comfortable in that lonely way I'd gotten used to ever since my children stopped calling regularly. Then came the knock, not the impatient rapping of the mail carrier or the neighbor kids selling candy bars. Just one knock, then silence, the sound of footsteps retreating. I opened the door and saw the elegant white box, carefully wrapped with a thin blue ribbon tied once around the middle. There was no mistaking the handwriting. I hadn't seen it in months, but I would have recognized it with my eyes closed. Sarah wrote like an architect, precise, no wasted curves, always in blue ink. I didn't open it immediately. I just stood there on the threshold, looking at the beautiful letters that spelled out my name, Margaret Ashford. I whispered it under my breath, as if it sounded different somehow coming from her. Back inside, I placed the package on the kitchen table. The coffee had gone cold. I reheated it and sat down, wrapping my hands around my mug as if I were waiting to be called to court. After months of minimal contact, not even a card when I had pneumonia, not a word when my sister died. Now this, eventually curiosity won. Inside the wrapping was a white box, and inside that, nestled in tissue like they were fragile, were cookies, dozens of them, carefully iced, each one different. Red flowers, gold leaves, stars with sugar crystals, all handmade. Sarah had never baked a day in her life. No note except for a small card tucked inside the lid. Happy birthday, Mom. Let's start over. I held the card like it might disappear if I blinked. My throat was tight, not much. Just that sweet ache that grows when you want something to be real but don't trust it yet. That afternoon, I got the call I'd been expecting but dreading. Sarah's voice was bright, almost musical. Mom, we're throwing you a party tonight. Michael and David are driving in. We've planned everything. She paused, and I could hear the smile in her voice. We want to make up for all the birthdays we missed. 6 hours later, I stood in Sarah's living room, surrounded by my 3 children and their families. The decorations were beautiful, elegant gold and white, sophisticated, nothing like the chaotic family gatherings of years past. Michael kissed my cheek, his cologne expensive and unfamiliar. You look wonderful, Mom. David handed me a glass of champagne, his wife Sandra hovering nearby with that practiced smile I'd never quite trusted. But it was Sarah who held my attention. She moved through the room like a hostess at a charity gala, everything choreographed, nothing left to chance. She'd always been the organizer, the one who made lists and checked them twice. Mom, she said, taking my hand, we have something important to discuss with you. The room fell quiet. Even the grandchildren seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere. Michael cleared his throat and pulled out a folder. We've been talking, he began, and we think it's time for you to stop worrying about managing everything on your own. David stepped forward. The house, the investments, the paperwork, it's too much for someone your age. Sarah squeezed my hand tighter. We want to help. We've prepared some documents that would transfer everything into a family trust. That way, you won't have to stress about finances anymore. I looked at the papers Michael was holding. Legal documents already prepared, just waiting for my signature. My name was typed at the bottom of each page, with little yellow sticky notes marking where I should sign. We thought this would be the perfect birthday gift, Sandra added, her voice saccharine. Freedom from all those responsibilities. The champagne turned bitter in my mouth. I set the glass down on Sarah's pristine coffee table, watching the condensation ring form on the wood. She didn't notice, she was too busy watching my face. You've thought of everything, I said slowly. We have, Michael said proudly. The trust is set up so that we'll handle all the decisions, but you'll still receive a monthly allowance for your expenses. An allowance? From my own money. I looked around the room at my children, Sarah with her designer dress and perfect manicure, Michael with his expensive watch, David with his smug expression. They thought they had it all figured out. This is very thoughtful, I said, picking up the pen they'd provided, but I have a confession to make. Sarah's smile faltered slightly. What do you mean? Well, I said, setting the pen down, I've been thinking about my legacy lately. About what I want to leave behind. I reached into my purse and pulled out my own folder, one I'd prepared that morning after a very enlightening phone call with my attorney. You see, last week I received some interesting information about my accounts. Someone had been checking my bank statements, calling my financial advisor, even contacting my lawyer about my will. The color drained from Sarah's face. Michael's hand froze halfway to his mouth, so I did some investigating of my own, I continued, and I discovered that my loving children have been planning this little intervention for months. David tried to speak, but I held up my hand. Please let me finish. I also learned that Sarah here has been telling people that I'm developing dementia, that I'm no longer capable of managing my affairs. She even had a doctor friend of hers prepare a letter questioning my mental competency. Sarah's perfect composure cracked. Mom, that's not. Oh, but it is, I said, opening my folder. I have copies of everything. The emails, the phone records, the preliminary paperwork you filed to have me declared incompetent. The room was completely silent now. The grandchildren had been quietly ushered out by Sandra, who looked like she wanted to follow them. So I made some preparations of my own, I continued. This morning, I transferred all of my assets into an irrevocable trust. Not the one you prepared, my own. Michael's face went white. What does that mean? It means, I said, standing up and smoothing my dress, that as of today, I no longer own anything. The house, the investments, the savings accounts, they all belong to the trust now. But that's, David started, generous of me, I thought so too, especially since the beneficiaries of this trust are the grandchildren to be distributed when they turn 25. Until then, the trust will be managed by my attorney and a financial firm downtown. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. What about us? Well, I said, gathering my things, I did leave each of you something. Sarah, you get my jewelry box, the one you always admired. It's beautiful, but the jewelry inside was sold years ago to pay for your graduate school. Her hand flew to her throat. Michael, you get my car. Of course, it still has 18 months of payments left, but I'm sure you can handle that. His mouth opened and closed like a fish. And David, you get the house. Congratulations. The mortgage was refinanced last year to help fund your business venture. You remember the one that failed. The monthly payments are about $3,000. I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. Oh, and about that monthly allowance you mentioned. The trust provides me with a very comfortable living stipend, enough to rent a lovely apartment downtown, travel a bit, maybe even move somewhere warmer. Sarah's legs seemed to give out, and she sank onto her designer couch. The most beautiful part, I added, is that this trust is completely legal and absolutely irrevocable. Even if you tried to contest it, which you can't because I've been deemed completely mentally competent by 3 different doctors, it would take years and cost more money than any of you have. I paused at the door, looking back at the children I'd raised, the ones I'd sacrificed everything for. Happy birthday to me, I said softly, and thank you for the lovely party. It was exactly what I needed to confirm I'd made the right decision. 3 weeks later, I was settled into my new apartment. The view was spectacular, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a balcony where I could drink my morning coffee in peace. Sarah called once, crying, begging me to reconsider. Michael sent angry emails about family loyalty and ungrateful parents. David showed up at my door drunk, demanding I fix what I'd broken. I didn't answer the door. The grandchildren, however, I still see regularly. They visit me here, help me unpack, tell me about school. They seem relieved, actually. Less tension in the family gatherings they're no longer obligated to attend. My attorney calls these visits to update me on the trust. It's performing well, apparently. The children's inheritance is growing steadily, compounding interest working in their favor for once. Sometimes I walk past Sarah's house on my evening strolls. I can see her through the windows, sitting at that perfect coffee table, staring at nothing. Michael moved back in with her after his wife left him. David's been staying in the basement since he lost his apartment. They thought they were so clever, orchestrating my downfall on my birthday. They never considered that a woman who'd raised 3 children, managed a household for 40 years,